Welcome to our evening coverage of the Camp David Trilateral Summit. I'm Yoon, joining you live here in Seoul. President Yoon is already on his way back to South Korea after finishing off a major diplomatic feat, the Camp David Trilateral Summit. At the first standalone summit between the leaders of Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, the three leaders discussed ways to institutionalize future cooperation and hold routine summits. Our Oh Soo-young, who has been traveling with the president, starts us off.
South Korea, the United States and Japan have formed a trilateral cooperation system to immediately address common security challenges across the Indo-Pacific, including North Korea and China's actions that destabilize the region. At their Camp David summit Friday, President Yoon, Joe Biden and Prime Minister Kishida declared key three documents aligning their stances and institutionalizing their three-way cooperation, sustaining and building on the ongoing rapprochement between South Korea and Japan.
자유인권 법치라는 핵심 가치에 기반한 한미일의 강력한 가치 연대는 더 평화롭고 번영하는 세계를 만들어 나아가기 위한 든든한 토대가 될 것입니다.
The three countries plan to hold a summit between the leaders at least once a year, along with meetings between their top security and industry officials. Various frameworks for dialogue and policy coordination include a consultative body that would muster an immediate discussion and response to common security threats under the joint commitment to consult.
특히 우리 세 정상은 삼국 공동의 이해를 위협하는 영내 긴급한 현안이 발생한 경우 신속하게 협의하고 대응하기 위한 소통 채널을 수립하기로 했습니다.
On specific security issues, the three leaders called for the complete denuclearization of North Korea, agreeing to launch annual multi-domain trilateral exercises to enhance coordinated capabilities. They will also launch a real-time missile warning system and a working group to counter Pyongyang's illegal cyber activities. Also, for the first time, the three countries expressed their mutual support for a free and united Korean peninsula, and addressed the North's human rights violations, including its abductions and detainment of foreign nationals and prisoners of war. Furthermore, the trio broadened their commitment to a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific, opposing changes to the status quo by force. Calling out China's, quote, dangerous and aggressive behavior and its unlawful maritime claims in the South China Sea. The three countries pledged greater engagement with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and Pacific Island countries on maritime security and development assistance. They will also work in tandem with security initiatives like AUKUS and the Quad. On global matters, the leaders agreed to join hands on peace and reconstruction efforts in Ukraine. While the three countries have not formed a security alliance based on collective defence comparable to NATO's, the new era of trilateral partnership has been designed to be progressive and enduring in a rapidly changing world.
Officials say the Camp David meeting makes diplomatic history in the 21st century as the three Pacific powers form a distinct and independent force for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific security environment. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Maryland.
Another key area touched upon was strengthening economic cooperation, mainly by stabilizing global supply chains and working together to develop key technologies like AI. Altogether, South Korea, the United States, and Japan hold a third of the world's GDP based on advanced technology. Our Kim Do-yeon with the details.
The Camp David Trilateral Summit has also started a new era of economic cooperation between South Korea, the US, and Japan. One key result from the talks was an agreement for a consolidated effort in protecting supply chains.
우리는 글로벌 공급망 안정, 에너지 안보를 위한 삼국 간 협력을 강화하고 해외 공급망 리스크에 대한 조기 경보 시스템을 함께 구축해 나아가기로 했습니다.
The president's top economic advisor explains that with the three countries accounting for a third of the world's GDP, this economic partnership has a huge impact on the global supply chain, especially considering the three economies are based on batteries, semiconductors, and other advanced technologies. The three also agreed to work together in research and development of key technologies in efforts to find future growth engines for the three countries.
특히 인공지능, 양자, 바이오, 차세대 정보통신, 우주 분야에서 한미일 협력은 큰 시너지를 낼 수 있습니다. 한미일이 추진하기로 한 국가연구기관 간 공동연구 개발과 인적 교류 확대는 3국이 과학기술 혁신을 주도해 나가는 초석이 될 것입니다.
In addition, the three will be working to protect their intellectual properties to block technologies from being illegally exported or stolen by other countries. To that end, the Spirit of Camp David Agreement explains that they will conduct inaugural exchanges between the U.S. Disruptive Technology Strike Force and its counterparts to deepen information sharing and coordination across enforcement agencies. The three will also hold the first trilateral meeting between finance ministers as well as launch a new commerce and industry ministers track, which will meet annually. While the regular meeting will focus on promoting sustainable economic growth and financial stability, as well as orderly and well-functioning financial markets in their countries, they will also discuss a fund to help developing nations.
We're deepening cooperation between our development finance institutions to mobilize more financing for quality infrastructure and secure communications technology to help low-income and middle-income countries throughout the region take on the challenges that matter most to their people.
South Korea's top office has shown confidence that this trilateral summit particularly institutionalizes economic efforts instead of just setting the direction. Hence, the president's top economic advisor says the announcements are guaranteed to be sustained. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The three leaders didn't meet just to strengthen peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. They looked further ahead, aiming to bolster peace around the world. Song Yoo-jin tells us how they'll be doing that.
The focus of the first-ever standalone summit among South Korea, the U.S., and Japan transcended their trilateral relations.
This summit was really about our relationship with each other and deepening cooperation across an entire range of issues that went well beyond just the immediate issues we raised. It was about more peaceful and prosperous Indo-Pacific, a region, quite frankly, that would benefit everyone living there and around the world if we get it right.
Together, the leaders of the three countries jointly addressed ongoing regional and global concerns. As part of their commitment to advance shared values of freedom and peace, they've scheduled a trilateral policy dialogue for October. There, the three countries will discuss ways to better synchronize and cooperate in areas of development policy and humanitarian response. Furthermore, the development finance institutions of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan will pool resources to support countries in need, enabling them to access high-quality infrastructure, combat climate change, and establish resilient supply chains. A memorandum of understanding was signed between the Export-Import Bank of Korea, the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, and the Japan Bank for International Cooperation. They'll jointly finance development projects aimed at enhancing the economies and societies of developing countries around the world. Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo have also underscored their shared ambition to enhance multilateral development banks' role in addressing global challenges such as poverty. One way is the formulation of the World Bank Group Evolution Plan that's set to be completed by October. This blueprint seeks to expand the institution's support for underprivileged nations. Another area discussed that's essential for sustaining all these efforts is the continuation of people-to-people exchanges.
글로벌 보건, 여성과 같은 다양한 분야에서 협력 체계를 구축하기로 했습니다. 한미일 미래 세대 간 유대를 강화하기 위한 한미일 청소년 정상회의도 개최하기로 했습니다.
Dubbed the U.S. ROK Japan Trilateral Global Leadership Youth Summit, the event is slated for early next year and will be held in South Korea's southern port city of Busan. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Thank you. Now we have time.
When spending hours at Camp David, the three leaders of Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo were seen not wearing ties. This apparently suggested that they were holding talks in a more candid setting. And on the sidelines of the three-way summit, the leaders each held separate bilateral meetings. Now, Bae-eun-ji tells us what was mainly discussed there.
President Yoon arrived at Camp David at 9:20 a.m. on Friday local time and stayed there for more than 7 hours before he left at about 4:30 p.m. The leaders of the three countries met at the presidential retreat in Maryland without wearing ties, which appeared to be an effort to show their strong bonds of friendship.
오늘날 미중유의 복합 위기에 대응하기 위해서는 영내 가장 발전된 자유민주주의 국가이자 경제 대국으로서 또 첨단 기술과 과학 혁신을 선도하고 있는 한미일 3국의 강력한 연대가 어느 때보다 중요합니다.
U.S. President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida also stressed the importance of their trilateral partnership.
And you've heard me say it before, Republic of Korea and Japan are capable and indispensable allies.
Making the trilateral strategic and collaboration a plus is only logical and almost inevitable and is required in this era.
Ahead of the Trilateral Summit, Yoon sat down with Biden for separate talks. Seoul's presidential office said in a press release that the two reaffirmed their commitment to achieve complete denuclearization for sustainable peace on the Korean Peninsula and decided to work closely together to deter North Korea's threats. It also said the two leaders highlighted progress on cooperation in economic security and advanced technologies and agreed to strengthen cooperation in fields such as nuclear energy and solar power. While at Camp David, President Yoon also sat down with his Japanese counterpart. This was his 7th bilateral summit with Prime Minister Kishida since taking office, as the two countries work to resolve historical disputes and restore ties. During the summit that lasted about 20 minutes, the two sides agreed to cooperate in a wide range of fields, including economics, finance, and energy, by resuming high-level economic and political talks by the end of this year. They also decided to strengthen cooperation in response to North Korea's threats, but did not discuss the issue of Tokyo's plan to release wastewater from the destroyed Fukushima nuclear power plant. 배은지, Arirang News.
The historic summit at Camp David garnered attention from a number of media outlets in the United States. The Wall Street Journal reported that the three countries took a significant step toward creating a bulwark against threats from China and North Korea, and that the Biden administration sees partnerships as a way to alter the strategic landscape against Beijing. Citing an expert, NBC News highlighted the significance of South Korea and Japan coming together despite their fraught relationship, originating in part from Japan's 35-year rule over the Korean Peninsula from before and during World War II. CNN also reported that in the face of persistent missile threats from North Korea and China's military maneuvering in the region, Yoon and Kishida have gone to great lengths to put aside their country's creaky relationship, marked by decades of tension and mistrust. It said the summit highlights Biden's mission of reinvigorating alliances, a key argument from Biden's 2020 campaign that's extending into his re-election bid. It also noted that from the start of his administration, Biden has sought to draw Asian allies like South Korea and Japan closer, in part to counter China. And earlier this morning, we mentioned how the Camp David Trilateral Summit is an important first step to institutionalize diplomatic relations between Korea, the U.S., and Japan. We're going to dig a bit deeper by including a visiting professor from Yonsei University Graduate School of International Studies. Joining me in the studio is Professor An Jun-sung. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, Professor An, as I mentioned before, institutionalizing seems to be a key word in this Camp David Trilateral Summit. So could you first explain to us what institutionalizing cooperation actually means?
Well, as you can see, that is the first time that three leaders get together, right? And they've been discussing this similar issues before in different format as like a sideline for the multilateral platforms. But this is the first time they actually set up, agreed to establish a trilateral platform to discuss on a regular basis. So institutionalization is more like, if you look at the contract issue, like in terms of legal perspective, like say there's an oral agreement, you can have orally agree to buy something and sell something, but why do you want to put it in writing? Because then you want to clarify the terms of agreement, that what they want to do, what they shouldn't do or should do under the agreement. That in that perspective, institutionalization is very significant, that three leaders get together and agree on the terms certain terms, and they display on the terms, right?
As you mentioned, in diplomacy, it always comes down to what types of terms are being used. That's why we're going to be looking at the 3 documents and what types of terminology they've been using. I would like to first look at the commitment to consult. And this one seemed to be mainly stressing security alliances. But how will we see strengthened security when the leaders made it clear that this wouldn't involve a formal alliance commitment or collective defense alliance?
It's a very interesting question because I asked myself the same question. If you look at the 3 documents, they signed 3 documents. Then there's the principles, right? Principles, and then the commitment to consult, right? The 3 documents that if we put together, there's about 3,000 words total. And I count up. And interesting about the spirit side is about 2,200.
Wow.
This is about majority of the spirit. But the interesting about what about the commitment to consult? How many words they have in that document?
How many?
Yeah, 141.
141, only
out of
141.
3,000, right? It's very short. I mean, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that the length doesn't really implying that how much the agreement they have it. But the problem is that look at a big picture here. In terms of international politics, international treaties, agreement, you see how much common understanding they have it among the 3 parties. So if you say, for example, if you have for the split side, you have over 2,000 words, means that they agree and they won't really talk about issues. But in terms from the other side, it talk about the consultation, about commitment to consult is very short because that they don't really put it too much word because they have a less understanding, relatively speaking, in terms of consultation about the commitment. And then plus it's very interesting because the term consultation is very open use by international organizations like the WTO or United Nations. Means basically then they respect sovereignty of each member. Means that I think same rule apply for that agreement, basically implying focusing on the sovereignty of all 3 member countries. They don't want to overstep on their extraterritorial application on any application of the law to their not law the terms of agreement to apply to that specific countries because there would be the legal issues.
Right, and they don't want to step the line over to what was pre-assigned and pre-designated before in terms of alliances.
Also the sovereignty issue.
Exactly. Now, you mentioned the word count. I would also like to add on to that. We're going to be looking at the spirit of Camp David. There, North Korea was mentioned 10 times. It was actually the region mentioned the most in this document. So I would like to ask, how are the 3 countries trying to deter North Korea's nuclear threat? And they also mentioned cybersecurity threats, right?
Very interesting question. If you ask those Korea, what do you think? Nothing new, nothing surprise, right? Very interesting. Let's look at different. I think that part, split part, I think is drafted by Korean side. I think. Why? Because there's cultural difference about U.S. and Korea.
Right.
In Korea, in the Korean culture, how we emphasize something, you repeat the same word.
That is
North
very
Korea,
true.
North Korea, North
Yes.
Korea, like freedom, 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 right? But in U.S., the Western culture, you don't repeat it.
Right.
If you repeat the same word, that's really not a good sign for the other side. It's more like you making it louder or something you emphasize some way and put it in a way, in logical way to emphasize in the beginning of first sentence, something like that. So the way I see that doesn't really carry much meaning to North Korea because they know it's coming anyway. But I think that North Korean issue is there, and that's really imminent issue for South Korean perspective, government perspective, compared to U.S. and Japan, right? I think that's the one they will emphasize it, but doesn't matter how many times you emphasize it because there's issue, the impending issue for South Korea, right?
Then can we evaluate that as a win for South Korea?
Oh, what do you mean?
As a win, I know it's really hard to define who's a winner in diplomacy.
There's no winner in international politics, I say. And then there's always price tag come on.
Yeah.
My concern is that no matter what they do on the writing, in written agreement, and you will see that price tag. So my concern is that personally, that what kind of price tag the President Yoon bring to get home together. That's the issue. They haven't discussed it. And from Japan's side, if you look at a big picture, I'm sure the Prime Minister very happy to have a new member because that obviously South Korea will share their cost, whatever financial cost there. But what kind of things we're getting from the Trilateral Summit.
Right.
That's the issue, and there's some things we talk about. The public talk about the nuclear waste in the Fukushima. That's the issue. What are we trying to get in? What are we going to get it? Will be island rather than North Korean threat. Well, that's the one already there, but there's a new issue coming up. So we have to wait and see what happened, how the administration handled that.
For sure.
Very tricky issues.
It's a very tricky issue. And speaking of price tag, if we stay on the spirit of Camp David, for the first time, South Korea signed off something that seems to have strongly condemned Beijing. So if you take a look at the screen, we have an excerpt from the spirit of Camp David, and the document quoted China's behavior in the South China Sea as dangerous and unlawful. It also said the three leaders maintained their position on Taiwan, calling for a peaceful resolution to cross-strait issues. So Beijing has been quite assertive with our, position in this trilateral summit. How do you expect relations with South Korea and Beijing to play on from now, though?
Well, look at here. Going back to the first question, what about the concert, the cooperation concern, what about the commitment issue? Well, if the foreign minister in the Korea both say in China, well, you have to do it this way. That's what the Biden wanted. But look at the commitment side. We have nothing. We just agree on the trilaterally cooperate, right? There's nothing very specific.
There's no obligation.
Yeah, well, yeah, no legal obligation. The sovereignty issue also. So I guess that's why we talk about the relative lengths of three documents. We can have, way to out, the pushing. We can do it. That's the only thing we can do. We don't hate you, basically. We don't want to be an enemy. I guess that's some political, maneuvering. I guess.
And how do you think relations will roll out with Beijing then?
Same thing with North Korea. Nothing new, no surprise. So I think that it's time for Chinese Beijing government to change their strategy, because I think they're kind of pushing it very hard, taking hard player position and a way to pushing it. I recently read the news about the Chinese government changed the policy about group tourists to visit Korea.
Right.
But I think a little bit late in a way, because they could have shown a good, better gesture, taking more, for more as an initiative earlier time, maybe more positive light on Korean side. But now it's maybe they need it. They probably knows that because they're into bed, they got cornered. Maybe they should sending us some gift. Basically that's untimely, but at least better than nothing.
Right, better than nothing. And on the brighter note, the retail industry and tourism sector is welcoming this, because we'll see more outbound tourists come to Korea.
Oh, yeah, we'll wait and see.
We'll have to see for sure. And moving on to the last document, the Camp David Principles. In this document, the leaders highlighted the importance of technology and economic cooperation. Now, how can we ensure a win-win situation for all three countries?
Tough question. Let me take the devil's advocate. I disagree, because the areas that talk about AI, frankly speaking, you don't have much AI industry in Korea. To be honest, if we look at the Kospi, any company have AI technology, there's none actually. Japan is fine doing well. They're doing very well in the humanoid side. U.S. obviously doing the military side, but Korea is very infant stage, very slow on stage. But I don't think they will call it cooperation per se. But I think they want to put something IT side, because I think that's kind of added by Korean side, because they want to put IT side. But the idea is that, do we really have cooperation with Japan, or that AI stuff, that will long story to see what happened. The political perspective, yes, maybe, but actually in terms of actual practical implementation of their agreement, then I think different story.
Because of the capability difference.
The different level of the development side in the specific industries.
I see. And I would now like to focus on economic cooperation. I think the Biden administration has emphasized numerous times that this is a very important way to go in order for alliances to be built. And it's really interesting to note that Biden chose to bring not only the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, into this summit, but also the Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo, to the table. What can we read into this?
Just put a plain English, send me more money, right? Send us more money, right? So, you know what? If I was there, I would say, what happened to IRA? You say you are the ally. What happened to IRA? We discriminate us. We pay the Hyundai and Kia is struggling because of the IRA, and then they just, that if you look it up, there's no electric vehicle agreement at all, because that's really a hot issue for Korean industry. Is missing out, and then ask the Fukushima wastewater. What happened to Fukushima water? Oh, it's not the agenda, right? So what are we getting from that agreement? other than what we have a trilateral agreement. Well, that's important. We had established the trilateral platform. I think that's significant. It's by itself, but what are we trying to go and get there, and what are we trying to actually getting out of it? That's the issue we're looking into. Greater expectation from the public.
Right. What should we have gotten then, Professor?
Something tangible, I guess. Something shown here. Well, the Biden agreed to take out Korea out of the IRA list. Say, well, we're ally, but it never happened because that. Frankly speaking, I think they're targeting Korean competitors because in terms of domestic competition in the EV market, Korea is very challenging because they are competing with the U.S. producers, right? So there's things that they never say limited, but they do it. But if you want to say, we want trilateral happens, let's omit Korea, take it out Korea and Japan out of the IRA to watch list. Yeah.
There should have been more tangible results, is what you're saying.
Yeah, show us your money, right? Don't keep calling us for the money. Just show me what you're doing, rather than talking political, that rhetoric saying, your freedom, peace, But what we're trying to get.
Exactly. I think you did scratch upon what a lot of people were thinking, but at the same time, it is symbolic to see that institutionalized diplomacy was discussed, and it's the first standalone summit. And another agenda that should have been mentioned but wasn't mentioned was a question asked by a lot of reporters towards the end of the joint press conference. It was about Japan releasing its treated radioactive water from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Now, President Yoon said this wasn't a part of the agenda, but do you think off the record that the leaders did talk about it? Why or why not?
Well, I don't think that they did. I think they talk about it because that's not what they know. There was a dispute issue. And plus, there's a public opinion issue. It's not about political leaders get together, agree on. Because I'm concerned is that Camp David, when I first time heard about Camp David meetings, I really be concerned because there was I got my personal deja vu. What happened to President Lee Myung-bak at Camp David? So happily driving golf cart, playing golf together, and got back. What happened? And that medical disease, things happen, demonstration, and his support rate really plunged. So very really bad thing happened. So my concern is that now they take like a baby step. And now now it's time for the administration to show some tangible result, something. Why did they sign this agreement? That's what we're getting from it, rather than North Korean nuclear threat.
Right. I think that's a very good point you made. And now I would like to ask the very last question. President Joe Biden lauded Seoul and Tokyo from coming together and showing political courage, especially at a time when we're seeing the world standing at what he quoted an inflection point. But now China, North Korea, and Russia, even before the summit, has been saying that this is America's way of countering China and people that clearly are not their allies and creating an Asian form of NATO. So do you think that the Trilateral Summit will shake up a new geopolitical order?
Well, it depends on perspective. I think that's a Joe Biden daydreaming of what happened. In reality, different. Even though NATO is not working as he hoped, right? NATO is some disagreement on some issues, financial issues also. So I guess the way they see that from U.S. perspective and the North Korea or Russia or China perspective difference, right? So I think it's a really political gesture at this moment, unless they will show produce something, some tangible result. And we'll see what happens. I think that the Fukushima water, the waste issue is the big issue because that they can handle it. Looking at the agreement, they say they trilaterally commit to consult, right, to get a group response. So what's the result of the Fukushima? It means that all government agree on the dumping the wastewater into the ocean. And I want to see how the administration say, because according to that agreement, the Camp David agreement, they have to say we agree to put it together. Obviously the U.S. already agreed because it's too far away. They don't really care about far away unless you live in Hawaii or Guam, right?
Yeah.
So that's the issue. So
we'll have to see how issues unravel from here. But thank you so much, Professor An. It was a pleasure to hear from you today.
My pleasure.
That's all we have for you today. Thanks for joining Arirang's special coverage of the Camp David Trilateral Summit. This was Yoon bringing you live coverage from Seoul.